It was a crisp Monday morning at JFK International Airport in New York. The terminal buzzed with travelers heading to meetings, vacations, and family reunions. Among them was Danielle Carter, a respected attorney in her mid-30s who had spent years fighting civil rights cases across the United States. After a week of exhausting depositions in Manhattan, she was finally heading home to Atlanta. Danielle had booked a first-class ticket weeks in advance, paying full price for the comfort she needed to recover from her grueling work schedule. She wasn't asking for special treatment, just the seat she rightfully purchased. As she approached the gate, she noticed the airline staff exchanging glances, whispering as she handed over her boarding pass. A pit formed in her stomach, but she brushed it off, determined not to assume the worst. "Have a pleasant flight, Miss Carter," the gate agent said with a forced smile. Danielle nodded politely and walked down the jet bridge, unaware that her presence in that first-class cabin would soon ignite a chain reaction. The moment Danielle stepped into the plane and turned left toward first class, she could feel eyes on her. A flight attendant, tall and blonde with a rigid smile, blocked her path. "Excuse me, ma'am," the attendant said coolly, glancing at Danielle's ticket. "I think you may be in the wrong section. First class is reserved for premium passengers." Danielle raised an eyebrow and handed over her ticket without hesitation. "It says to a first class." "That's me," the attendant's smile faltered. "Well, there must be some mistake. We'll have to ask you to take a seat in coach until we can sort this out." The passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, watching the exchange. Danielle could feel the heat rising in her chest. She had experienced subtle discrimination before, but this was blatant and public. "I paid for this seat," she said firmly. "I will not move unless you show me a legitimate reason." The attendant's face hardened. She waved over another crew member, and within moments Danielle was surrounded by two attendants and the cabin manager. Their whispers weren't even subtle. "We can't have her here. Just move her quietly. It's policy." Passengers began recording with their phones as the confrontation escalated. The manager leaned down, voice dripping with condescension. "Ma'am, if you don't comply, we will have security escort you off this plane. You can either take a seat in the back, or you won't fly today." Gasps echoed through the cabin. Danielle felt every eye on her, the sting of humiliation sharper than any insult. But instead of shouting, she stayed calm. Years in courtrooms had taught her the power of measured silence. Finally, she stood, smoothed out her blazer, and said clearly enough for the cameras to capture, "I am being forcibly removed from a seat I lawfully purchased, because you don't believe someone who looks like me belongs here. That's discrimination, and it won't end here." With that, she gathered her bag and walked back down the aisle, not defeated, but deliberate. She knew she had just set the stage for something bigger. As Danielle exited the plane, the murmurs grew louder. Other passengers exchanged angry words with the attendants, some shouting, "She paid for that seat, and this is outrageous." By the time Danielle stepped back into the terminal, videos of the incident were already uploading to social media. Her phone buzzed with notifications as friends, colleagues, and even strangers tagged her name. Danielle didn't smile, not yet. She knew this wasn't just about her, it was about every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. And by the time the airline realized what had just happened, it would be far too late to undo the damage. Danielle sat in the terminal lounge, her phone buzzing non-stop. At first, she thought it was just friends texting her, but when she opened Twitter, her heart skipped a beat. The video of her calmly stating, "I am being forcibly removed from a seat I lawfully purchased," had already racked up 50,000 views in under an hour. By the time she refreshed, it had doubled. Hashtags like #FirstClassJustice and #Danielle Carter were trending. Strangers from across the country chimed in. "This is why people record everything." She handled it with pure class. The airline should be ashamed. Imagine paying for first class and being treated like this. Lawsuit incoming. Danielle exhaled slowly. She wasn't seeking fame, but she understood the power of visibility. This wasn't just her fight anymore, it had become a national conversation within hours. Back at corporate headquarters, the airline's public relations team was in crisis mode. Executives huddled in a glass-walled boardroom, screens replaying the viral video on loop. "This doesn't look like a misunderstanding," one PR manager said grimly. "It looks like discrimination, period." Another executive rubbed his temples. "We need to control the narrative. Draft a statement, say it was a policy miscommunication, offer her a voucher." But their legal counsel shook her head. "That won't cut it. She's an attorney, and she's already gone viral. The longer we wait, the worse this gets." Meanwhile, Flight attendants from that crew nervously texted each other, their messages leaking online. We didn't know she'd make a scene. I told the manager this would backfire. The internet ate it up. Public sympathy for Danielle soared. By the evening, major news outlets had picked up the story. CNN ran a segment titled, "Attorney Claims Airline Discriminated Against Her in First-Class Incident." MSNBC's headline read, "Viral Video Sparks Airline Racism Debate." Danielle's phone rang again. This time it wasn't friends or strangers. It was a reporter, then another, then a producer from Good Morning America. "Ms. Carter," one journalist asked during a phone interview, "what was going through your mind when they forced you out of your seat?" Danielle answered with poise, "I thought about every client I've ever represented who told me the same story being told they didn't belong. I knew I had to stay calm and let the truth speak for itself." Her words struck a chord. Clips from the interview spread just as quickly as the original video. That night, Danielle sat at her kitchen table in Atlanta, surrounded by legal files and her laptop. She wasn't just an attorney, she was a strategist. And she knew the airline had violated her rights. She drafted a statement of her own and posted it on Twitter. "I was humiliated today by airline name after being forced out of the seat I paid for. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was discrimination. I will not stay silent, and I will be pursuing every legal avenue available. No one should ever be treated this way." Within minutes, her post gained thousands of retweets. Lawyers, activists, and even celebrities reached out to offer support. Civil rights organizations tagged her, promising to stand with her. Danielle leaned back in her chair, a quiet fire in her eyes. She hadn't chosen this fight, but now that it had landed in her lap, she was ready to take it all the way. And as she powered down for the night, the airline executives were just realizing the storm they had unleashed. By midweek, the airline's internal investigation had begun. The crew members involved were summoned for questioning. The once confident cabin manager now sat nervously at a long conference table, hands clasped tightly. "Did you or did you not tell Ms. Carter that she could not sit in first class?" the investigator asked flatly. The manager shifted in his seat. I was following procedure. We sometimes upgrade certain customers and procedure." The investigator cut in, "Or personal judgment." The silence that followed was damning. Flight attendants whispered among themselves, some pointing fingers, others claiming they had warned the manager this would cause problems. The tension in the room was suffocating. Within hours the decision was made. The entire crew on that flight was suspended pending termination. Meanwhile, Danielle was far from idle. With her years of experience as a civil rights attorney, she had already filed preliminary motions against the airline, breach of contract, discrimination, and violation of passenger rights. Her legal brief wasn't just airtight, was devastating. She cited federal regulations, precedent-setting cases, and pointed to the clear evidence. The viral videos. Reporters swarmed her courthouse appearance, cameras flashing as she walked confidently inside. "Ms. Carter, what are you hoping to achieve with this lawsuit?" one asked. Danielle didn't break stride. "Justice not just for me, but for every passenger who has ever been mistreated because of prejudice." Her words echoed across news outlets, cementing her as not just a victim but a symbol of resilience and justice. The backlash reached Washington. Several members of Congress, already critical of the airline industry's customer service scandals, seized the moment. "This is not an isolated incident," one senator said during a press conference. "It's part of a systemic issue in how passengers, particularly people of color, are treated. We demand accountability." Petitions flooded online platforms, calling for boycotts of the airline. Stock prices dipped as investors worried about the brand's tarnished reputation. Passengers canceled flights, choosing competitors instead. On social media, the support for Danielle grew louder by the day. "She's fighting for all of us. Time to clean up the airline industry once and for all. Respect and equality are not optional." The company, once dismissive, now scrambled to minimize the damage. But the tide had already turned against them. Invitations poured in from talk shows and panels. Danielle appeared on Good Morning America, where she spoke directly to millions of viewers. "I wasn't looking for fame or conflict," she said. "I just wanted to sit in the seat I paid for. But when they chose to humiliate me, I realized this wasn't just about MIT, it was about everyone who's been silenced in situations like this. That's why I'm fighting back." Her calm confidence struck a chord nationwide. Civil rights leaders praised her for turning pain into action. Advocacy groups launched campaigns in her name. Even rival airlines took subtle jabs, promising respect for every passenger. Danielle hadn't expected to become the face of a movement, but she embraced the role with grace. And as her lawsuit gained momentum, the airline executives began preparing for the inevitable, a settlement that would cost them dearly, both financially and reputationally. For Danielle, though, money was never the goal. Her goal was change, and she was closer than ever to achieving it. Months later, the case finally landed in federal court. The courtroom was packed, journalists lined the back, activists filled the gallery, and the airline's top attorneys sat grim-faced at the defense table. Danielle entered in a navy suit, her posture straight, her eyes steady. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was a fight for every passenger who had been told they didn't belong. Her opening statement was simple but powerful. This case is not about a seat. It is about dignity. It is about respect, and it is about holding accountable those who believe some people deserve less of both. She presented the viral videos, expert testimony on airline policies, and records proving she had purchased the first-class seat. The evidence was irrefutable. The defense tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, but the jury wasn't buying it. Behind the scenes, the airline's leadership panicked. The lawsuit had already cost them millions in legal fees, but the real damage came from public trust evaporating. Competitors advertised their commitment to fairness. Customers abandoned loyalty programs. The company's stock slid to record lows. Then came the breaking news. The airline announced the termination of the entire crew involved in Danielle's incident, plus a sweeping retraining initiative for all staff. But critics weren't satisfied. On talk shows and op-eds, commentators made it clear, firing a few employees didn't erase the systemic issues. The company had to face real consequences. After weeks of testimony, the jury delivered their decision. The courtroom fell silent as the foreperson read the verdict. In the matter of Carter v. Airline name, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Danielle Carter. Damages awarded $15 million. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The number was staggering, but it wasn't just about the money. It was a clear message to the airline industry. Discrimination carries a price. Danielle remained composed, but inside, she felt the weight of victory not just for herself, but for everyone watching. As reporters swarmed outside the courthouse, Danielle faced the cameras one last time. This isn't just a win for me, it's a win for every passenger who's ever been told they didn't belong. Let this be the start of change. In the months that followed, Danielle's case became a landmark example in law schools and diversity training programs. Airlines across the country quietly reviewed their policies, desperate to avoid becoming the next Carter case. Civil rights groups invited Danielle to speak at conferences, and universities asked her to lecture on justice and perseverance. She became more than an attorney, she became a symbol of resilience and accountability. But through it all, Danielle stayed grounded. On her first flight after the case, she once again walked into a first-class cabin. Passengers recognized her, whispering her name, some even clapping softly as she took her seat. The flight attendant approached with a genuine smile, handing her a glass of water. "Welcome aboard, Miss Carter, and thank you for making sure this seat, and every seat, means the same for everyone." Danielle smiled back, not out of pride, but out of relief. Change was slow, but it was real, and as the plane lifted into the sky, she knew her fight had left a mark far bigger than one seat had reshaped an industry.